Okay, we are going to begin. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Block. I am the co-director of Pathways to Resilience with Tanya Schwartz. And today our session is about social emotional learning. We have several wonderful speakers who we're going to be looking forward to hearing to. But just a little bit of context before we get started for today's conversation. We are going to be learning about how school districts are going beyond the traditional academic structures to create inclusive learning environments and teach specific skills like self-awareness, self-regulation, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. We know that research shows that having these skills can help improve academic performance and help students prepare for life and future educational and employment opportunities. We have three speakers who are with us today: Andy Tucker from CASEL, Tanya Albornoz from Utah, and Emily Arkfeld from Nebraska. So we're very excited to hear from these folks. And for those of you who have not been on a Learning Network call today, these calls are fairly informal in nature. We do it as a facilitated dialogue conversation. And so I'll be facilitating, but we encourage you to actively use the chat, ask questions that you might have, participate in the conversation, share your experiences. We also received several questions in advance. Thank you. We are incorporating those questions we got in advance into the conversation as well. We are also recording, and this session will be available afterwards for you to be able to watch. So let's start with you, Andy. Can you briefly introduce yourself and provide an overview of the basics of SEL, what it is, how it relates to trauma responsiveness?
You bet. Thank you very much for having me and my colleagues here, Lauren, and Pathways to Resilience. My name is Andy Tucker. I am the Director of Policy for the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. We are the world leader in social and emotional learning. As a matter of fact, our organization was founded about 30 years ago and coined the term social and emotional learning. So I'm going to start by sharing a few slides and help you all I'd like to make sure that you understand what SEL is. And when I say SEL, it means social and emotional learning. And the one thing I want to point out quickly, and I try to do this always, and sometimes I forget, but I want to point out that the "and" is important. This is social learning and emotional learning. It's both. So some students need lots more social skills than others, and some students need more emotional skills than others, and might be really strong socially, but have a harder time emotionally, while the reverse may be true. So that "and" actually is important, and it's something that's often forgotten when people talk about SEL. So it's social and emotional learning. So what is SEL? So SEL is, so before we do that, we often, one of CASEL's three signature practices when it comes to social and emotional learning is what's called a warm welcome. So in the chat, I would like you to think about a young person in your life, and in the chat, write, what do you hope they will learn and or be able to do to be successful in their future? So a young person in your life. Think about that. Please put your answer in the chat. Oh, is my screen sharing being paused? Are you not seeing the screen?
No, it looks like it's loading, so you might want to try again.
I'm sorry, I had no idea. Do you see it now?
Yes.
Yeah, not the slide.
Did it again. Wow. All right. I apologize, everybody. I had no idea you weren't seeing my screen. Yeah, let's try this. I'll just show it in this mode instead. So let me look in the chat. What are people saying? Communicate effectively and manage their emotions. Thank you, Tanya. Work in a team. Resilience. I'm not surprised to see resilience given the folks that are on this call today. Emotional regulation. Thank you. Obtain an HSE and then get employment. Believe in their abilities even if others don't. That's great, Emily. Thank you. Yeah, so we all know that these are things that we hope for our students. Social and emotional learning, hopefully, will be able to provide that for students, and that's what it's about. So CASEL's definition of social and emotional learning. Social and emotional learning is an integral part of education and human development, and our specific definition is SEL is the process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage emotions and achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. I think if I was to go back to the chat, we would probably see a lot of this and a lot of your answers. I did see emotional regulation in a number of the answers that we want. Everybody needs these types of skills, right? These skills are vital to life success. So CASEL has developed a framework that talks about what we hope for in social and emotional learning and the ecosystems in which folks learn social and emotional skills. So you'll see in the framework that we have this is what we call our CASEL wheel. There are the 5 central competencies in the middle, as well as the environments in which students and young people learn these skills on the outside. Let's look at the individual competencies to start. Lauren mentioned them at the beginning. They are some of them at the beginning. They are self-awareness, so the ability to understand one's own emotions, thoughts, values, and how they influence behavior across contexts. Self-management, I'll let you read. Social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. I'll dig in a little bit deeper on each of those. So self-awareness, again, is understanding our emotions and thoughts and how they influence our actions. So when young people or adults have strong self-awareness, they have a healthy sense of identity. They're able to self-reflect. They understand their thoughts and feelings. They have self-respect and they have a sense of purpose. The second core competency is self-management, which is the ability to manage one's own emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. So some examples of that: belief that their voice matters and choices matter, that they're able to overcome challenges, that they have agency, that they can manage their emotions and the feelings that they have in order to stay motivated and to be able to be successful. Social awareness is understanding the perspectives of and empathize with others, including those from diverse backgrounds. I think that we all want for people to be able to show empathy and compassion for others and to understand each other's perspectives, to feel accepted and included, and to have a sense of belonging and trust. Relationship skills, which is the fourth competency, is establishing and maintaining healthy supportive relationships and effectively navigating settings with diverse groups. I would suggest that everybody on this call probably has strong relationship skills. We need strong relationship skills in order to be successful in our careers. That involves a collaborative problem solving, communication, having strong communication skills, active listening skills, asking for and offering help, cooperation, working together. And finally, responsible decision-making, which is making caring and constructive choices about personal behavior and social interactions across diverse situations. You can see there some examples, including critical thinking, which we know is a constant need in employment situations. So these are the 5 central competencies of the CASEL has identified for social and emotional learning. And there are 4 specific key learning settings. So they're the classrooms in our schools, families and caregivers and communities. Each of those places plays a role in the development of the social and emotional competence of kids. Couple last thoughts. There are hundreds of studies that demonstrate that social and emotional learning benefits students and benefits young people. It improves academic performance. It provides protective factors for mental health concerns. It boosts skill development, and it improves school climate. So when social and emotional learning is implemented in schools, it has a protective effect for students. So when we think about trauma informed, the thing about social and emotional learning and schools that implement social and emotional learning with fidelity, which you'll hear more from Tanya and Emily, is that it provides a space of belonging, a warm and caring environment where students are heard, where students are able to be themselves. So with that, I'm going to post in the chat this deck. There are many more slides than I've talked about here, including lots of research, including all kinds of stuff. So if you want to learn more, you're welcome to dig into this deck a little bit and learn more about social and emotional learning. Happy to take questions about it too as we go.
Thanks, Andy. So I'd now like to turn it to Tanya. Could you briefly introduce yourself and your background and talk a little bit about what Utah is doing around SEL?
Sure. Thanks, Lauren. Good afternoon. I am Tanya Albornoz. I'm the coordinator for prevention and student services at the Utah State Board of Education. So I oversee all prevention programs at the state level, as well as overseeing our school counseling specialists. I'm also a clinical social worker and work part-time at a treatment facility for youth. But as far as what Utah is doing in the realm of SEL, in November, I believe, we released our technical assistance document around social emotional learning, which I believe participants have access to a copy of that. And that technical assistance document serves as a guide for our schools when they're thinking about or in the midst of implementing SEL. It provides a shared language and understanding for educators and all stakeholders around what the definition is of SEL, why it's important, and it also describes the outcomes we're aiming to achieve for SEL initiatives. So this is really our first step in the work here in Utah, and it's hopefully helped to clarify understanding around what it is and why it's important. And then shortly after releasing that document, we convened a community of practice with education leaders from across the state who are currently implementing or who are interested in implementing SEL in schools. And so we've organized that around a strategic prevention framework for implementation. And we've just enjoyed a lot of great conversation with our school leaders. And it's been a great experience and has provided those who are engaged in the work with an opportunity to collaborate with one another, learn from one another's experiences, and share resources and actions that are helpful when they're implementing SEL in a systemic way. So we've had a very positive response, and we have other work planned moving forward. We'll probably have other future community of practices, and we're working on embedding SEL into all education initiatives, such as our personalized competency-based learning framework and other things happening within education.
Thanks, Tanya. Emily, can you introduce yourself and talk about Nebraska's multi-tiered system of support, and also talk a little bit about how you're helping educators implement social, emotional, and behavioral learning?
Absolutely, thank you. So my name is Emily Arkfeld. I'm a social emotional behavioral learning specialist with Nebraska NeMTSS. I also am a clinical social worker, woohoo! And so came to this position through school social work and also community mental health as well. And so Nebraska NeMTSS is a framework designed for really that each student has access to learning experiences that enhance their educational outcomes. And we have a really strong strategic focus on the well-being of each student to promote those safe, engaged, supportive, and in challenging learning environments. And so then within NeMTSS, my team of the social emotional behavioral learning specialists, we are also through the Nebraska Center for Research on Children, Youth, Families, and Schools. And so we work to provide evidence-based professional development and implementation support, really hoping to build educators' capacity to practice, teach, and model those SEBL competencies among adults, because they need to have them too, and our students, in order to improve school climate, culture, and learning. And I do want to point out, so we are SEBL. We have, when we built our team, the SEBL team, we really noticed they're just inextricably intertwined, the social emotional learning and the behavior. And so we wanted to combine that into our title to show that alignment in the work that we're doing across the state. And so we do our professional learning at conferences. We do it through our educational service units. We do free webinars statewide, really just to get the word out there. So anyone who's doing the work can come and be a part of it. And then as they are ready to take on more, maybe within their district, they can reach out, and then we do some of that implementation support for them as well beyond that.
Thanks, Emily. So Andy, there seems to be a lot of confusion as to what SEL is, which is creating some unnecessary politicization around these issues. And I was wondering if you could kind of help set the record straight on this.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that I think most people are pretty aware of the debates that are going on across the country around education. And social and emotional learning has been drawn into those debates. As there are some that claim that it is it's a framework that indoctrinates students, that some students, some places say that it is basically a Trojan horse for critical race theory, which is a theory that, if you're not familiar, that is an academic theory that is typically not taught in K-12 schools. So then it's the furthest from the truth. A couple other things that people say is that it takes the place of, or takes, we should be focusing on academics. But instead, what we really need to understand is that social emotional learning supports academics, right? Studies show again and again that when effective and high quality and evidence-based social and emotional learning takes place in schools, it actually increases student academic performance. It is not about teaching students what to think, it's about teaching students how to think. So I think that there is a lot of misconception. There's a lot of mischaracterization of what social and emotional learning is right now. And what we are trying to do as an organization and as a coalition is, how do we help people understand that what social and emotional learning is? It's about helping students to gain those, to build environments in which students feel that they belong, that they're accepted, where there's a warm, welcoming environment, so that they have the ability to access and to acquire these essential skills that they're going to need for life.
Thanks, Andy. Tanya, could you talk a little bit about what resonates with different audiences in the state of Utah?
Yeah, sure. There's been a high amount of interest due to the conversations that are happening across the nation about SEL. So when we talk about SEL here in Utah, one of the things that we like to say is that kids are always engaged in SEL. They learn it just by being a part of our world. Adults are never not teaching SEL. And there's never a time when they're not picking up on those skills. This has happened since the beginning of time. It's not a new concept. And this concept of teaching these types of social and emotional skills has been called so many different things over time, but calling it SEL is simply putting words to an initiative that means we're intentionally paying attention to teaching students healthy and adaptive social emotional skills. As far as communicating about that and that concept, it's resonated deeply with parents that, you're teaching these skills at home and they come to school and they see them, they put them into practice, and they're seeing those skills modeled in the real world context, and emphasizing that these skills are being reinforced, and they're providing opportunities for students to develop those healthy skills that they're learning at home and practice those at school with their peers. So we've provided this sort of a context to a lot of our cross-sector partners, as well as parents and other audiences, and help them understand that SEL is a key strategy for building those protective factors that Andy was talking about.
Thanks, Tanya. Emily, can you talk a little bit about some of the key partners in your SEL work in Nebraska?
Yeah, that'd be great. We are really lucky right now where our Nebraska Department of Education is doing a lot of work around coherence within their departments to make sure we are streamlining what we are asking our districts to do. And with that comes a very strong whole child focus. And so we've had the opportunity to collaborate and integrate that work into our NeMTSS framework and the conversations we're having and the work we're doing. Our educational service units have been fantastic and integral and valuable partners in the work that we do. They know the districts, they know their schools, they know what's going on. And so the ability to walk alongside them in the work that they're doing has been a huge component for us in getting our word out there. But really, I think at the end of the day, it's the educators that recognize the importance of SEBL. So they're the ones that are requesting the professional development to enhance their implementation. They are attending our trainings. They are asking for trainings and workshops. And then they're taking that back to their colleagues and their coworkers within their schools and their districts. And they're saying, hey, look, we can try this, or have you done this, or let's try to build something around this. And so really, we couldn't do the work we're doing without those educators saying, like, yes, we see this, we value this, give us more of this. How can we work together?
If I could jump in real quick, just to kind of follow up on what both Tanya and Emily just said, when it comes to support first, and to follow up on the question that you asked me about the politicization of SEL, when it comes to public perception and to the what people want, all surveys show that educators, parents, and students and teachers all fully support. In the vast majority, up to 90% of folks support this work. So the vocal minority that is out there saying that this is indoctrination is truly that. It's a vocal minority. It's because the vast majority, we're talking 90% of parents, 92% of teachers, 90-some%, I think it's like 3% of administrators, school administrators, and others all believe that teaching these important skills is vital to a student's education.
Yeah, and I'll add just a little bit to that as well. When we've done this work, talking a lot to our leaders and administrators in education from around the state, what they've told us is that when they're able to sit down with parents and have a conversation with them and explain what SEL really means and what they're trying to accomplish, then they find that the vast majority of parents are very supportive of this, and that building that understanding and that shared understanding of what we're trying to accomplish is key to the success of this work.
Sorry, I'm going to add on to that also. I think, Andy, I really appreciate you going through the competencies at the beginning and breaking that down a little bit of what that means, because it's these constructs and they're big and overarching. And so like, what does that mean? And so if parents or individuals are just hearing that, it is hard to have some of that understanding. But when you break down to the skills and what falls into those, it's like, oh yeah, that's, of course I want my kids to know that. Of course I want my students to know that. And so I think that's so important in the education piece of just showing really what it is and how that's already happening, like Tanya said, in classrooms across the United States every day.
Thank you. We have some questions that were submitted by others, so I want to incorporate those into our discussion. One of the questions is, how can community organizations or local government support schools in implementing SEL practices? I'm going to take that one.
I can go first. If you want, Tanya, you came up, you can go first. So I think that, you know, it's about supporting schools. It's about understanding, and realistically, SEL is everybody's. It involves everyone. You saw in the CASEL framework that we have, you saw those four rings that went around it. Communities are a major part of social and emotional learning. It's the supporting of those skills. I mean, one of the things that we talk about all the time, and I alluded to earlier, is that these skills that we're working through high quality social and emotional learning are the same skills that students need in order to be successful in life, right? In order to be employed. I mean, you could think about them almost as employability skills. You know, understanding your emotions, having empathy for others, working cooperatively, critical thinking, collaborative problem solving, et cetera, et cetera. All of these are things that we all do every single day in our jobs, right? And so working as a community and being a community organization who recognizes those things, raises the importance of them in your community and with your employers, and with the people that live in your community, I think would be extraordinarily supportive and helpful.
Yeah, I agree with Andy. And one of the things that we've had a lot of success with here in Utah is that we have a very robust prevention network and community, and robust implementation of the communities that care. And the prevention community has really embraced these concepts of SEL. They may not talk about them exactly the way that we talk about them in education, but they've been really supportive about providing opportunities for helping parents and other community members understand what SEL really is and the outcomes that we're trying to achieve with it. We've also had a lot of support among some of our key state leaders, such as our governor's office and the First Lady. We're super grateful and blessed to have their support, and they provide opportunities, a lot of for dialogue around SEL. And we have our Department of Health and Human Services, who are also really collaboratively engaged with us in this effort. So, and like Andy pointed out, including your community, like your chambers of commerce and other business leaders, once they understand that these are the ideal characteristics that their workers need to have in order to be successful in the workplace, then they become supportive of the SEL effort as well. So communities and other government offices can help provide those opportunities for learning and understanding of what SEL is, and then helping them understand how it translates to the classroom, and how in reality, this is just a part of normal education experience, healthy, appropriate educational experiences.
Thanks, Tanya. And you mentioned the First Lady. We were lucky to have the First Lady of Utah on our steering committee, and the former First Lady, Suzanne Shore of Nebraska, who was on our steering committee. I'm sorry, Emily, you were going to add something. Go ahead, please.
No, that's fine. I also think like our out of school time providers, our coaches of activities in the community and different activities, they are teaching these skills through what they are doing also. And so making that explicit connection for them of like, you are doing these things, or here are some ways to talk about that. So it is like that wraparound. I also think it's interesting. I like to think that if we are teaching this to our students and having good family caregiver communication to where we're saying this is what we're working on and here's maybe something you can do at home, then the adults in their lives as well are learning some of these or practicing some of these, and then maybe there's some self-reflection and growth that they are then also taking into their relationships and into their careers and things like that. And so I do think it's a trickle effect of, if we can focus on this in the schools, it really can have a positive impact on the community as a whole.
Thanks, Emily. Another question we have from somebody in the Zoom is, what do you think would make SEL most accessible to all LEAs? I don't know, Tanya or Emily.
I'll jump in here. I think one of the things that we have been hearing and understanding from our LEAs or our school districts and charters is that a big part of this initiative is the adult SEL work. We need to spend a lot of time helping to support our educators. If they're not able to put these skills into practice in the classroom because they're overwhelmed or because of the atmosphere or whatever's happening, then it'll be difficult for them to model and teach these skills to the students. And so I think a large part of this work, making it accessible, is spending some targeted time at the beginning of an implementation, if you're just implementing SEL, or like taking a pause from other parts of implementation and spending some deep time taking care of your educators and helping them develop their own SEL skills, helping them to understand the importance of SEL, and then that translates back into the classroom as they're working with their students. So,
thanks, Tanya. Go ahead.
Yep, I've got more. I should have warned you that about myself, is that I like to jump in. Tanya, that was beautiful, and I appreciate you really talking in depth about that. I also think one of the things that I wrote down was, I think letting our educators know this, we're not asking you to do something additional. This is not something else you have to squeeze into your day. You are already doing that. And I think if we give some professional learning, some resources around the academic integration of this so that they can see, oh yeah, maybe I just need to take 10 seconds and say this more explicitly, but I'm already doing this when I teach XYZ, I think would be really helpful. And so it's not this big overwhelming thing they have to take on, but just a few tweaks here and there and some of their language and activities that really highlight the skills that we are working towards.
Yeah, I can't agree with that. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm jumping into, if I can. I can't agree with what Emily said more. I think that, it is so much of it's what good teaching looks like a lot of the time, right? I mean, good teaching is helping students to feel welcome, to feel like they belong, to build relationships with one another, good teacher-student relationship, and then helping them to build these skills. But the academic integration piece is so vital. And so oftentimes we do all this stuff, but we don't actually name it. And I think that helping students, and particularly in today's economy, helping students to name these skills, because we're moving to a skills-based economy, right? Where employers are going to be looking for skills, specific skills, and students need to be able to know what skills they actually have. So by helping teachers to understand, this is the work that we're doing, these are the skills, and this explicitly is the skill we're working on here, so that students realize, oh, I did that well, so I have acquired, at least I'm in the process of acquiring that skill, would be enormously helpful. I think a lot of that is done through strong professional development, strong professional learning for teachers, but many teachers already do this work very, very well without realizing they do it really well.
So tell us a little bit about how you've worked to align and coordinate SEL with other initiatives in your organizations. Tanya, do you want to start there?
Sure, I can start. So really this work began maybe a few years before I joined USPE, but it really helped to have a greater involvement of the community, and like I said, our business leaders were involved in this. So what happened was our state really wanted to define a portrait of a graduate, which are basically the characteristics and skills that we want students to have when they graduate the K-12 education system. And so we surveyed business leaders and put out a lot of opportunities for people to provide input into what those types of skills might look like. And of course, we got the things back that Andy talked about at the beginning, such as critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, teamwork, communication, respect, responsibility, those types of things. And then that was put together in a formal portrait of Utah's portrait of a graduate, which was just put in the chat for everyone. And that deeply connects to SEL, because SEL is the strategy for helping teach those things. And so that sort of set the tone for the entire agency and all of the work that's happening at the Utah State Board of Education, that we're paying attention to those skills in all areas of academics as well as student services, and providing those strategies in each of those areas so that we can build those characteristics and skills that are defined in the portrait of a graduate. And so things have just grown from there as far as on the school-based mental health side, as well as the academic side. We've integrated it into our personalized competency-based learning framework that's being rolled out to educators statewide, and just integrated as much as possible into all parts of education. And we're working to continue that, right? That's an ever-evolving process. And making sure that we're providing examples of ways that it can be integrated at all levels, and in all, as in pre-kindergarten all the way up to post-secondary services.
Emily, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I talked a little bit about the coherence work that we're doing at the Department of Education. And so again, we've been lucky to be a part of that. And really, I think one of the things that makes Nebraska NeMTSS unique is our regional model. And so we have 5 regions across the state, and each region has our regional lead, which is all things MTSS, multi-tier system of support, and systems building. And then we have our social emotional behavioral learning specialists, our PBIS coach, and early childhood implementation support facilitators. And so we really work as a team to provide whatever support might look like for our local ESUs and our districts. And so aligning all of the work we're doing and our messaging so that, again, they can see, well, it's not this MTSS thing and this social emotional thing, and oh gosh, now we have PBIS. We really are working together under our NeMTSS framework and putting all of those things into place. And I think that has helped, again, us align our initiatives and what we're doing, but then also for our districts to also see how they can align the work that is already being done and bring it together to make it more streamlined for themselves, so it's less overwhelming and less on their plate.
Thanks, Emily. I didn't say this at the beginning, but I did want to note to people that we just keep going with me asking questions, but you in the audience should feel free to chime in. We want to hear about your experiences, hear your questions as well. So feel free to use the chat, or if you have a question, you can kind of raise your hand and we'll take you off, and you can go off mute to ask that question. So please just feel free as we're going to chime in with your questions. No need to wait until the end. So wanted to hear, I know Andy talked a little bit about some of the political challenges, but aside from that, Tanya and Emily, are there any other common barriers to implementing SEL that you've had to overcome or help other educators or administrators overcome?
Yeah, I think we covered some of them already, but just to kind of reiterate, I think a lack of understanding of what SEL is, and having that that clear definition that everyone can provide input into, helping people understand what SEL is and what it is not, that it begins in the home, that it's always developing. Another one of the common barriers is just that pushback that we sometimes get from parents who don't understand. So what I always encourage our school districts and charters to do is to embrace parent input and involvement, and deeply involve parents and students in SEL work so that both groups also understand the importance of this. And that means more than just like surveying them. It means like having them as stakeholders as a part of the SEL work. It could mean like getting their input all the way along through implementation so that you're making sure that you're meeting the needs that come up. Sometimes needs change over time and we need to be responsive to those. So having their voice involved in all stages of implementation is critical. And then building, again, like one of the barriers is the thought from educators, like, again, this is another thing. And we talked a little bit about that, about helping them understand that this is already a part of what they do and how they can integrate this more fully into their classrooms to provide that safety and that feeling of connection with students and that positive school climate, and helping them see the benefits of SEL in their classroom.
Emily, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think one of the barriers the biggest barrier we ran into this last year is just the time that our educators have. There's a teacher shortage, there's a support staff shortage, there's a sub shortage. And so to ask our educators to come spend, 4 days with us or something across the school year it's just not feasible. And so we really looked, we're big on continuous improvement. It is a major part of what we do at NeMTSS. And so how do we do this better for our educators to still get our messaging out there and help to support them in what they are trying to do? And so we really looked at how can we get this in their hands? And so we started just Zoom webinars once a month or more, and they are recorded and they are accessible on our website. So you can come if you want, or you can just watch the recording. And then there's lots of grab and go resources in that. So we know most of them, like, okay, that's great, but like, what can I do now? So making sure we get things in their hands that they can put into place immediately. And then presenting at our statewide conferences. So whether that is our paraeducators conference, we spoke at our school safety conference, our MTSS summit. So all of these different places that have all of our different educators, how do we get our message out there for them and make that connection? Like, you can reach out to us. We're here to help you. We are a free resource and we want to help. And another thing we had run into, we are lucky that the work we do is people seek us out because they're interested. So we don't have as much of the pushback because when they're coming to see us or talk to us or watching our webinars or coming to presentations, that's out of their own free will to come be a part of that. And so that has been lucky. But when we have had trainings, sometimes the teams that come are not they don't have a decision maker on the team. And so that was an issue we ran into as well. So we had counselors and special education teachers and school psychs, and fantastic, and that's great, and those are good people, but they don't have the decision making power to go back and say, we're putting this into place. And so we ran into some barriers of getting our information and our action planning into the right hands.
Thanks, Emily. I know Andy talked a little bit earlier about some of the outcomes that you might be looking to achieve in terms of students having the skills that they can take into the workforce with them. But I'd be interested in hearing also about any other sort of short and long-term outcomes that you hope to achieve, or any examples of schools or districts in your state that are really kind of doing this well. Tanya, oh, sorry, you're on mute.
I was just saying, Emily, you can go first this time.
That's fine. I have lofty goals, lofty long-term goals for this work. I think we can do great things. But really, I think our short-term goal is to build that state and district capacity, to provide the leadership, professional development, and technical assistance to improve the social emotional well-being and positive behavior outcomes for all students. Really, that's what we are working towards. But Andy, I think you said this, and Tanya, I know you've said it or alluded to it as well. Really, what my hope is that everybody who comes into a school, whether that's a student, whether that's an adult, an educator in the class or in the building, feels welcomed, accepted, appreciated, respected, connected to somebody, so that school is a place that people want to be, our students and our adults want to be, and they're not just holding their breath trying to get through the day. And it's a place where they feel valued. So that is my ultimate long-term goal, I think.
Yeah, and just to echo what Emily said, I have we have a lot of long-term big goals for this work. And if you go back to that technical assistance document that we talked about earlier that we released, it really has the outcomes that we're hoping to achieve and outlined in that document, as far as what this looks like in adults and what this looks like in students, and what teachers can do. So my long-term goal is to build a system that can help us achieve the goals and the outcomes that are outlined in that document. And really that leads to better academic outcomes, safer learning environments, improved relationships between adults and students in education, and just fosters that learning atmosphere. It leads to students who are more prepared in the workforce, better economic outcomes, and students who are able to do all these skills and put them into action. Right, so those are some of my long-term outcomes. We do have a number of school districts that are, I would say, doing this work well and have been for a number of years and have laid a solid foundation for this work. And I'm happy to provide a connection for anybody who wants to maybe talk to one of their peers here in Utah who I think are doing the work well. Like, reach out to me and I can connect you to them, and you can have a conversation. I'd be happy to facilitate that.
Thanks so much. We got another registrant question. How can these principles transition into the adult education learning environment? This is coming from somebody at a technical college. We'd like to begin with that question.
So as far as adult SEL, or are we talking about how, I guess I'm just wondering, I don't know if the person who asked the question is on, but if you could clarify a little bit for me. But the first thought that I had about that is, like, we've already talked about adult SEL, right? And the importance of it, and just making sure that everyone understands that if you can manage your own emotions, if you can put these skills into action, then that translates into your success and your success in the classroom as an educator.
And I will add, so we, again, not knowing 100%, but my thought was, so we have presented at a couple of our like local universities in the state, colleges and universities, to some classes. And some of those are education classes to where we are talking about the importance of embedding social emotional learning into your classroom when you graduate and get into there, and the importance of doing that, because it's not taught, and it should be taught. But also we've been in some non-education classes, just some higher education classes and courses where we do just introduce them as these are skills. They are skills across the lifespan. And so, yes, we're going to talk about it. It's going to look different if you're in kindergarten or in 8th grade, or if you are in college or post-grad, but the skills are the same. And so helping them to recognize how the skills are applicable to them at that point, at whatever point they are at in their life.
I would agree. I think that what we're talking about here is we're talking about just instructional practices that are good instructional practices wherever they're occurring too, right? So, I mean, if these are students that are in adult education classes at a community college, and the teacher wants to learn more about how to incorporate social and emotional learning into what they do, because that is definitely not something that is, I wouldn't say it's, well, it's good teaching, but it's not something that is necessarily, there's not a whole lot of professional learning, I don't think, that takes place at the post-secondary level around social and emotional learning, because it's more of a has more of a K-12 focus currently. But many of the materials that you could find on our website, or the materials that Tanya has shared, or that Emily has shared, or that are across the country and state departments of education and elsewhere, anything you can literally, you can Google all kinds of stuff about social and emotional learning. But if you want to go to some of the authorities, go to your state agencies or come to CASEL.org and just download some information about what it looks like and what this looks like in the classroom. Because again, the teaching practices are the teaching practices. I mean, it's like it's building positive relationships with students. It's incorporating SEL into skill building work that you do, etc. So. Lots of resources out there, and we can help direct people if it would be helpful.
And I also think we do a lot of training with the adults and their own SEBL, and really our most of our focus is on that self-awareness and self-management skills, relationships, but that's like Andy's saying, I mean, that's good teaching and you're doing that anyways, but really identifying who are you, what are your triggers, what are your student triggers, what are your just environmental triggers, how do you regulate yourself, self-regulation, how do you manage some of those things. And so when you really have a focus on that and do some deep reflection, that can help with some of those challenging students. So again, I don't know if that answered, but we do spend a lot of time on that. And I know Tanya does because she talked about that earlier as well.
Yeah, and I'll just add too, like, I think a super important part of this, we alluded to it at the very beginning, or Andy talked about it at the beginning, about how this helps understand students who have been exposed to trauma, right? So integrating also education about the effects of trauma into those pre-service programs and helping your students understand how trauma presents, and then why SEL helps to counteract those things, and that those positive relationships that you build with your students are actually a protective factor against further trauma or things of that nature. So I think helping articulate how we did at the beginning about how students who've been exposed to trauma need direct, intentional instruction on SEL to help build their own confidence and to build their own protective factors against the trauma they've experienced in the past, as well as those that they might experience in the future. So I would just recommend making sure that when you're teaching students who will be teaching students, that you integrate information about trauma and trauma exposure, and then why SEL and other trauma-informed methods can help as you are in the classroom teaching those students.
Fantastic, thank you. We always like to ask a little bit about sustainability, since we know getting things started is wonderful, but keeping them going is even better. So we'd love to hear from you about how you're working to increase the long-term sustainability of your work, or how you're hoping to expand or scale your efforts in the future. Sorry, Emily, you want to go first?
Sure. So like I said, we work on that regional model. And so we are really working on within those regions to build those relationships and those partnerships in order to keep that work going. We are always analyzing our own data and our stakeholder feedback to continuously improve what we're doing. And are we meeting the needs of our districts? And if we're not, what do we need to change to do that? So currently we are in the hiring process, but there are a few of us who serve more than one region. And so growing the team so that we ensure that we have that equal representation in each region, aligning again the language and our messaging to grow our reach. And I think so. We are working to find people who live in the regions that they serve, so that they have a relationship with districts. They have, we can't take, so in Nebraska, the Omaha metro area is huge. Well, to serve, and then our western part of the state is very rural. So if I just have knowledge of the Omaha metro area, I'm not going to be able to serve our rural, some of our K-12 buildings very well, because I don't have the knowledge of what that even might look like. And so finding people who live and work and have relationships and connections and experience in the areas that they're working, I think is huge in building that sustainability over time.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I'm a huge proponent in our work of making sure that we're helping administrators and leaders work from a framework of a strategic implementation framework, right? So I talked about that a little bit, but we organize a lot of our professional learning around the Utah version of SAMHSA's strategic prevention framework, and trying to deeply embed SEL into all of the prevention work that we do statewide, to help people understand that SEL is a universal approach. It's a tier 1 approach for students, and it's needed for all students, and it just as much as we can integrate SEL into those tier 1 approaches, those universal prevention approaches, not just in schools, but also in communities, in all organizations that work with children and families. I think that is key to the long-term, longevity of this work and the sustainability of it, and just helping people understand that SEL is an approach for building protective factors. It is prevention in and of itself. And so as a prevention approach, it's important that we provide it to all students and also to families and parents, as we've sort of talked about already.
For us, sustainability goes from CASEL's point of view, and we are a national organization that works to, our job is sustainability of social and emotional learning, right? That is what we work to do, is to help to provide the technical assistance to state agencies and to districts and to schools to help ensure that high quality evidence-based social and emotional learning is available for each student in the United States. And we're working internationally as at this point as well. So amongst the many ways that we do that, we have an enormous number of resources on our website. We work very closely with the Collaborating Districts Initiative, with the Collaborating States Initiative, of which Utah and Nebraska are part. We work with both the federal and state policymakers to ensure that funding continues to be available, and that there are not challenges to programming that support social and emotional learning. So of the many things that we do, those are the ways that we are trying to make sure that this work sustains long term for the benefit of all kids in our country.
Thank you to everyone. So I always like to ask the same final question of each of our speakers, because we do have state policymakers and program implementation staff on with us today. And so I'd like to hear from each of you, what are two actionable steps that others should consider taking to implement SEL or SELB in their own districts and agencies. So Andy, why don't we start with you?
If I were to say one step that agencies and districts can take, I would start with the adult SEL. I mean, I think making sure that your adults are well trained and are well themselves.
Yeah, and at the risk of sounding repetitive, I was going to say that too, like take care of your educators, front load your implementation, or take significant amount of time to work on those adult SEL initiatives first. Help them understand what SEL is and put it into action in their own lives. And if they're not able to regulate themselves or model those skills, they won't be able to provide that safe environment for students. So it's just as important to take the time to front load it that way as anything else. And then my second one, I would say, again, find ways to include students and parents deeply into your SEL implementation, beyond surveys, but help them provide real-time inputs into what's needed. So you can adjust your approaches and ensure you're meeting the needs, because different needs pop up, and if you have their voice at the table at all points of implementation, they'll provide you with the information you need in order to be successful.
And I agree with both of those. I'm going to take it like even one step before that, of just even identifying the team that is doing this work. So who's having these conversations and making sure it's a representative team. So like Tanya said, students and parents should have a place on this team as well as representative within your school or your district too. And doing it in a strategic way. When we build it into the system or strategically, we have that better chance for sustainability.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank our fantastic speakers today. This was really great, and you provided a lot of actionable insights and reminder that this is something that is already happening, and it's just something to be really thoughtful and mindful to make sure it's being incorporated within schools and can help have lifelong effects for students as they grow up. I want to remind everyone that we have lots of sessions actually scheduled for the rest of the year, but our next session is next month. Please do register. It's called It Starts With Us, Building a Trauma Responsive and Resilient Workplace. That's in April. And then in May, we'll be talking about creating physical spaces to foster health and resilience with trauma-informed design. And we have several other sessions that are going to be online soon if they're not already. So we'd strongly encourage folks to register. If you get our newsletter, you'll see it there, but also the links are on our website. So thank you again to Andy, Tanya, and Emily, and for everyone else who joined today. And this will be available online shortly. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.